So, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Let us pray for the success of marital life, and also for peace, justice. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So this morning we continue chapter 2, our natural knowledge of God, and we are on the my summary, my commentary on page 9. Last class we saw that there are three ways of looking at the knowledge of God. We saw those who say we can know God, and we can know God. We call that theist, but they are also deist. You remember that, huh? The difference between theists. Theists, they say we can know God, and God can take care of us after His creation. He can relate with us. He can reveal Himself. Okay? Theists, they say no. God is like an architect, a maker. When He produced that, after that He say okay. He let the thing go by themselves. So man is totally independent of God. You know, man has to run the business. That is the deist. Is the God of the Freemason. After you have another, they say, oh, maybe God exists, but we cannot know. So, maybe. We said that those people, in fact, they don't deny the existence of God, but they say we cannot know God by our reason. That is very, they don't oppose God, but in fact, when they say that, when they say we cannot know God by our reason, what do they make with religion? They make a religion only a question of blind faith. So religion for them is only blind faith. There is no rational way to know God. If we know God, it is only through faith, and faith without reason. And I think that is not reasonable. Because even an act of faith in God, as a Christian, or as a Muslim, or as a Jew, or as a Buddhist, etc., requires the usage of my reason. Otherwise, it's not a human act. We saw that for a human act, in philosophy of man, a human must be made with my intellect and my will, my free will. You know? And finally, those who oppose God, the existence, they deny, we call the atheist, no? Atheist. Atheist. So we have the three positions. Now, if we go to the first position, because it is our position here, so we are theists, no? We are theists. We accept that we can know God through our reason. So the page 9 here is how now we can arrive to the idea of God. What is the origin of the idea of God? And it is the object of our class this morning. So how can we know God? Two positions. Someone, they say, we know God by nature. And by nature, in our intellect, when we are born, we have already the idea of God. And we call that the innate idea. It is an inborn idea. So every man has the idea of God. That is a position of those who are idealists, like Descartes. We see that, and those who think like Malebranche. And they don't say no. We are not innate. Our idea of acquired. They are not innate. And that is the position we study in philosophy of man. Huh? We saw that every idea we have passes through our senses. So we have two divisions corresponding to the two concepts of knowledge. And what I told you last semester, the most important chapter in the whole philosophy is the chapter on knowledge, because it is there that everything has to take an opposite direction. Huh? So here we have to see if our idea of God is innate, or if we can acquire, or we acquire our idea of God. So as a result of instruction received, it is possible that we receive some knowledge of God. We are not born with, but we acquire, we receive. We cannot give ourselves the idea of God, but we can receive the idea of God. So, doubtless, if we try to examine the origin of the idea in our own minds, we shall find that we possess it very much in the same way in which we come to be possessed of many other ideas. In fact, the idea of God is known the same way we know the existence, what is a cat, or what is a tree, or what is a flower, what is justice, It's the same way. We acquire that. We are born as a blank slate, and we are, after that, impressed by the... we abstract, we remember that? We abstract from the phantasm, the idea, and we put that in our mind. After that, we universalize. That is the way. We know through our senses. So our knowledge of God comes from our sense experience. It's incredible. Our knowledge of God must pass through our sense experience. Why? Because it is the only way, the lone way, and the sole way we have to know. Okay? So, so we acquire that. Okay, now we will study first those who affirm that the ideas are innate, and after that we study those philosophers who affirm that the idea of God is not innate but acquired. So let us go to the first 3.2, the innate idea of God. So the idea of God for them is innate in the human mind, that it is a part of the original mental equipment of man. So we are born with some idea. The problem of those idealists, idealism, it is to know how those ideas are in us. So St. Augustine will say God put those ideas on us. And Descartes the same, So we know God, but because God put in us our idea. So to prove God, we use the idea God put in our mind. So two reasons in favor of this opinion. Of course, if brilliant men like Descartes or St. Augustine affirm that, there must be some reason for that. The first reason, is it not the idea of a supreme being in the minds of men generally? In fact, it's not a fact that naturally every man have an idea of God. Even the atheists have an idea of God. How they can deny God if they don't have an idea of God? It's different to have an idea of God than to prove the existence of God. For example, do you have the idea of a cyclops? A leprechaun? Yeah, that, huh? If you don't have, you go to the dictionary, they will explain what is a leprechaun. Huh? That is proper to Irish when they drink too much on St. Patrick's Day. You see little Ben green man. And a cyclops, and we say that now in the cartoon, huh? Many cartoons, they have cyclops. So the little baby, 3 years old, they see cyclops on TV. Huh? So they know, but it's different between to know what is a cyclops and to affirm the existence of a cyclops. So the problem is here. The idea of God, like the idea of cyclops. The idea of cyclops for us is acquired, of course. But the idea of God for them is not acquired. It is innate. We are born with that. Okay? St. Augustine says that. Descartes and idealists. Because idealists define, remember, their ideas within their mind. The origin of the idea is not depending on the object. It's important to understand here what is idealism. The idea depends on the the knowledge I have of the thing before I see the thing. And when I see the thing, there, that is, it's a real rabbit. Yes, it's a rabbit. Because I have the idea of rabbit. Okay. Secondly, is not there a certain amount of difficulty in explaining how we can have an idea of God, while at the same time God is not an object of immediate experience of knowledge? So, the difficulty, I have an idea of God, but at the same time, I have no experience of God. How we can conciliate that? So if I have an idea of God, and I have no capacity to experience God, the idea I have cannot come from my senses. You understand the reasoning? Huh? If I have the idea already in my mind, and I cannot know God through my sense experience, therefore the idea must be in my mind, independently of my sense experience. So they have two reasons leading those people to believe in the innate idea of God. So I continue, then, is no direct disproof of the extent of innate idea in the mind. No appeal to consciousness can ever settle for us what the first beginning of our knowledge were. In fact, if I have an innate idea, I cannot find when I have that innate idea. Even if we have the idea of God, can you say, maybe someone, when you, for the first time you have that idea of God? No, nobody. I cannot say that for myself. Well, maybe we listen to our father or to our mother, they spoke about God, So maybe for some family who are, that are very atheistic, maybe they will speak about God, against God, but the word God will come to the ear of the child, Okay? But we don't know. In fact, for us, what we know, we cannot know when we have the first idea of God, but if we could two explanations. If I cannot fix the time, when I have the first idea of God, it can be either innate, or it can be enter my mind without my conscience. And many things like that, we know. Many things enter our mind before we are aware of that. We say Papa, we say Mama, Mommy, before we know what is a mother and what is a father. No? Okay? And they are not innate idea. We say that why? Because we listen. Your mother say, Mama, I love you very much. Mama, Mama. Okay. Here, in fact, Father McCormick, what he wants to say? He wants to say that those who accept the innate idea of God, they have reason for that. They have some reason for that. Okay? But one must reject the innate idea of God. Why? Because of the principle of economy. Well, St. Thomas, as a principle, it was used also by Occam. We call the razor of Occam, Occam razor. That means what is not necessary, we have to cut that. So here, because of the principle of economy, beings are not to be multiplied without necessity. So this principle requires us to reject the innate idea of God if we can know God as a resultant of our reasoning on the thing that are the object of immediate experience. That means we have to use only the idea we acquired through our senses. As we can do so, we are justified in rejecting the innate idea of superfluous. If we can know God through our senses, why we can, when can we have innate idea? It is of no use, because I can know God through my senses. I don't need to have innate idea. Maybe I have, but it's not necessary, because I can have that in another way. So it is the principle of economy. It's not a very strong principle, but it is a principle that why God will multiply the way to know Him. He will give us innate idea, And at the same time, He will give us the power to know Him through our sense knowledge. So we don't say it's not possible. It is possible. In the proof just after, we will see that it's possible to have some intuitive idea of God. It is possible. But it is not necessary, because we have a knowledge of God through our experience. Looking at the creation, looking at motion, we see that the proof of the existence of God. So, who proposed that intuitive knowledge of God? And here we have three philosophers. We have Descartes, and we have Malebranche, and we have a priest from Italian priest from Torini, Father Gioberti. Well, the three are on the side of the innate idea of God. And it's interesting. Descartes is a good Catholic. Saint Augustine is a doctor of the church. And Gioberti is a priest, Catholic priest. So that is not impossible to think about that. That we cannot refrain God to have the power to give us ideas. We cannot. But it is not necessary, because we have another way too. Okay?
Can you explain a little bit more? Beings are not to be multiplied without necessity?
Exactly. Okay, I give you the case exactly we are studying. Well, we can know God through two ways. Either through innate ideas, or through acquired ideas. Okay? But if we can know God through acquired ideas, is it necessary to have innate ideas?
No.
No. But we cannot deny the possibility of the innate idea. You know, that is the reason why. If we can know through our senses, it's not necessary not to have, but we cannot deny that. But I have an argument against innate idea. If the innate idea of God, the knowledge of God will be innate, how we can explain those who are not accepting the existence of God, you know?
Wouldn't it work the opposite way? If you had the innate, why would you need the acquired?
Yes, but the fact, we start from the fact.
Right, yeah.
So because the fact, the other is a hypothesis.
Yeah, right.
But the fact is, we can know God through ours, without knowing, without innate idea. So we cannot deny the capacity of God to give us the innate idea. Is the reason why it's not contradictory for Descartes, for Saint Augustine, and for Father Gioberti to say we have innate idea. It's not contradictory, but it's not necessary, because we have the other way.
Would they argue that you can't know through sense experience?
Of course, those people are idealists.
Right.
They are on the side of those who say we cannot trust our senses. Remember that. Huh?
Right.
Here we touch exactly the chapter 7 of Philosophy of Man. When we study that our knowledge is objective, passes through our senses. And the idealists, they say, no, our knowledge is innate. Our senses are only the occasion, we use the term used by Father Malebranche, to say we know the reality. Okay? I go now to, okay, now then with Descartes. Well, Descartes. That theory, in general, we call that ontologism. Ontologism. Ontos in Greek means in Latin ens, and in English being. Present participle. That is the same thing. The study, the knowledge of ens, the knowledge of being. It is a part, the first part of metaphysics. You remember, metaphysics has three parts. The first part is ontology, study of being, existence. The second is epistemology. Epistemology, the study of the value of our knowledge. The value of our knowledge. In philosophy of man, we study how, but epistemology is to prove. In fact, it is apologetic, if you want, a kind of apology. And finally, we have philosophy of God, or natural theology. or philosophy of God. They are the three parts of metaphysics. Okay, I come back to Descartes. So Descartes made use of the fact that we have an idea of God to prove the existence of God. He had that in the bit. You know, I can prove the existence of God. Why? Because God gave me that idea. And when you study fallacies, you remember? We call that the petition of principle. Vicious circle. That means Mary is a good leader because she was chosen. And she was chosen because she is a good leader. You know? We turn around. So here it is the weakness of the proof of idealist from innate idea. Because the guarantee of the proof is given by the what? We have to prove. We have to prove, okay? So therefore, there must be an object for this idea, and no other object but God himself could cause the idea in us. Well, this is the reasoning. You see, if we have an idea of God, and God is infinite, it's impossible that that idea come from a finite thing, you know. So only an infinite being can put in my mind an infinite idea, but it's the idea of God. That is the reasoning used also by Saint Anselm. Saint Anselm. The ontological proof of God. We see. I don't insist now because we have to study that next week, in 2 weeks. Okay? If it is granted, the last at the bottom, it is but a short step to the assertion that God must then be the object of the immediate experience. And that our idea of God is intuitive. That means if I don't know God through my senses, so how I can know God? Only because I have an experience of God. A kind of experience of God. Okay. This is the reason why they call that sometimes intuitive knowledge of God. What is the word intuitive? Intuition is to know something without reasoning. You remember the difference between reasoning and intuition. Intuitive, do you reason to affirm that I am here? No. That is intuition, directly. But if I was outside, and you say, I think Father Michel is there because I listen to his voice, that is through something, or through the witness of another. Okay? Sometimes a student here, I am just preparing to begin the class, and once is not here. Someone, oh, no, Father, he is coming. I don't see him, but I trust. That is indirect knowledge. But when I see the person entering the class, it's an intuition. So if we don't know God through our senses, through deduction, through experimentation, we must know Him through directly intuition. Okay? So that means my innate idea gives me a direct idea of God as infinite, and as infinite He must exist. That is the reasoning of Saint Anselm, the reasoning of Descartes. We call that the ontological proof of God. Another priest, it's comic, a priest. They are not atheists. Malebranche, he was an Oratorian priest in France. He was a great mathematician. It's interesting to see that idealists, most of the time they are mathematicians, because mathematics don't refer to experience. We can build a whole world completely independent of reality in mathematics. Okay, so made such an intuition of God the source of all our idea, claiming that we see all things in God, who is immediately present to our mind. So we know God, God is present to my mind, and in God, in Him, I know everything. Because God is in everything, He's sustaining everything. So I don't know everything through my senses, I know everything through my knowledge of God. That is farther than Descartes. Descartes does not say that. So Father Malebranche, he goes farther now. Okay? And finally, Father Gioberti, he said God is the primum logicum, and the primum ontologicum. What is the meaning of that? If to understand that, I will come back to the definition of truth we study in philosophy of man. When we study philosophy of man, we said that there was a logical truth and an ontological truth. For example, when I speak about being, every being is one, every being is true, every being is good. You remember Chimenes, when he went, the king of Syracuse asked him to check if the crown that was made with gold was really made with gold. He wanted to know if his crown was ontologically made with real gold. That means the reality must correspond to the idea. The reality, the rice, the thing, the crown of the made with gold, the gold of the crown, must correspond to the reality. We start that. If you buy a ring, and it is supposed to be made in silver or in gold. If it is really made in silver, it is ontologically true, corresponding to the idea of silver. But if after 2 weeks the color changed, it become green, you say, no, that is true. It's not true. It was copper covered with silver, you know. So that is not true, ontologically true. So it is the truth in the thing, in the ontos, in the thing in the race, in the thing. Now, logical truth, it is what we speak when we say, I am true, you are true. That means what I think corresponds to what it is. It is the correspondence of my mind to the reality. Here it is the corresponding of the thing, the race, to the mind, to the idea. Okay? So, if you understand that distinction, you understand that here. So there is the logical level and the ontological level. But when we study logic, we study substance and accident. You remember that, huh? You study many relation, quantity, etc. All those concepts were on the level of logic. We studied the first principle. We studied that, huh? On the principle of contradiction, for example, principle of identity. We studied that at the level of second intention, as principle in the mind. But those principles are in the mind because first they were in the reality. So that those principles, when they are in the reality, they call that ontological principle, you know. So that means the order of thinking and the order of existing, they are different. But they are, the order of thinking reflect the order of reality. No? What I think must reflect what is in the reality. Because can I say because I think something, the thing exists? No. But I think something because the thing exists. So you see the relation between both of them, huh? Ontological truth. So that priest says, I read the text with you, and now you can understand better, I hope. God is the primum logicum, the concept, if you want, logic in my mind, as well as the primum ontologicum, that means the first in the reality. That means the concept I have of God corresponds to the concept, to the reality of God. That means there is a necessary relation between the logical concept of God, I have innate idea, in the reality of God. As a consequence, so God is the first in the order of knowledge, as well as the first in the order of reality. So because the level of logic reflects the level of being, ontological level. So if God is the first in the reality of being, because it's the cause of every being, he is necessarily the first in my mind, in my logical level. Okay? as a consequence, our first intellectual act must be the intuition of God. The first thought I had in my life must be the idea, the intuition of God. Why? Because everything starts from God. No, in the level of reality. Where is my chart? In the level of reality, race and here mind. Huh? Okay. What is the first reality in the level of reality is God, because everything comes from God. You know. Therefore, in my mind, the first idea I must have must be the idea of God. So everything I know starts from that. Like everything in the reality starts from God. In my mind, every concept I have starts from the concept of God. Okay? According to Gioberti, the two orders, knowledge and existence, will be one. There will be no distinction, in fact, between them. That means what is true in the order of logic is true in the order of being. And what is the order of being must be the same in the order of logic. So God is the source of every being. So the intuition of the idea of God is the source of all my all other ideas. That is the theory of Gioberti. So we have three persons, a good Catholic, they affirm that. And St. Augustine also is an idealist also. So in such system of knowledge, knowledge of God is explained by the primitive knowledge. That means the first knowledge I have must be the intuition of God. It is totally opposed to St. Thomas. Huh? Okay? It is God that is first known, and other things, or at last other things, except individual facts or events, are known only through this primitive intuition of God. Then all my knowledge is enlightened by my first intuition. Now, if you see that, everybody should be a theist. And how is it possible that if we have as first intuition of God, our first idea, and I am an atheist, you know? Okay, let us go to the criticism of that. So Descartes' claim will be arguable if our idea of God was a direct and positive one, representing God as He Himself. That means if I have a direct idea, that means if I have intuition of God, if I see Him, nobody on earth sees God directly. We see God indirectly. But if our idea of God rather is an analogical idea, it is what we studied last week, that our approach of God is necessarily analogical, not only for God, for every spiritual reality. Not only spiritual, every immaterial reality, we have to use analogy. Okay? So I continue. Its objective cause needs not to be God Himself, because our knowledge of God starts from our sense experience, but may be any other being whose reality has any analogy to the reality of God. That means, how can I know God? I know God through some being. For example, from my father and God Father, or an architect and God architect. You know, a man is intelligent, God is intelligent. I know God from His effects. Like I know Leonardo da Vinci from his painting, from his words, from his writings. You know, I can know you only from your games. In class, of course, I can know you at the refectory as a philosopher. Okay. So Father Malebranche now. Father Malebranche, as for the direct intuition of God, if we were only a fact, what said Malebranche? He said, our intuition of God is the source of our idea. In fact, that idea of Malebranche is the same idea we have in Father Gioberti. Same idea. Okay? If we were only a fact, it would be the simplest explanation of the origin of God. If it was that, in fact, it was very easy. Everybody knows God. By nature, it is in my mind. And I cannot understand why Marx and Ho Chi Minh don't believe in God. Freud, Nietzsche, etc. They are not stupid people. They are genius. Why they don't? Maybe they are blind. I don't. Okay. So unfortunately, for the existence of such intuition of God is not borne out by any evidence of our conscience. Nobody can affirm, can have because to affirm, look at that, to say that my intuition of God is the first thing, to affirm that, I must have a reason for that, I must experiment that. Nobody has that experience. Nobody. We can have after some experience of God because God manifests to us, like to Moses, for example, to some saints. But the first intuition of God, nobody knows. It is out of our knowledge. If it is true, we have no knowledge of that. Okay? But, and it would seem as if we ought to be conscious of it if it is the first step of our intellectual cognition. So, because the first time I reason, to reason, I must be aware, no? I must be awakened, I must be aware to reason. So, if God was the first intuition I have, I must be aware of that. The first time I use my reason clearly, I should know. The first thing is not the existence of my father, not the existence of my mother, the existence of God. God exists. And because God exists, you father, you exist, and you mother, you exist. Is it the way we think? Is it the way we know, we learn? No. We learn first the existence of our mother. The first reality in our life is the mother. And the father when he is there. Unfortunately. But now we know true. When we are 18, we go to philosophy, and now we ask questions about that. The intuition of God is not at the beginning. Experimentally. And nobody can prove we have that from experience. Okay? I continue. Besides, if we form our idea of God from the direct intuition of God, the idea ought to represent God as He is in Himself. If I have a direct intuition, for example, you have a direct intuition of me. The first time you saw me, you have a direct intuition. But to have a direct intuition of your teacher, you must know him face to face, no? So if I have an intuition of God, I should see God face to face. And that is not conform to the reality. No? Okay? Now, as a matter of fact, it does not do this, but rather represent Him under analogy. So, when we have a natural idea of God, it is coming from our sense experience. We abstract and we compare and we make comparison, we call analogy. Okay? Now you go to Father Gioberti. You remember he said the logical level and the ontological level are they are going together. Okay? They are not different. Concedo, we accept that it is undoubtedly true with reference to God's knowledge. Of course. If we speak about God, it is true. In God, the logical, the level of thinking and the level of being are the same, exactly the same. There is no difference in God between to exist and to think. But in us, there is a difference, no? We think, we exist, and after that we think. No? We don't think, after that we exist. Is the reason why we cannot accept Descartes when he say, I think, therefore I exist. Only God can say that. Because our existence does not depend on our mind, depend on the mind of the Creator, you know. Okay. So now, yet, excuse me, nego, I don't accept, nego, I deny. It cannot be held with reference to our knowledge. For us, logical order is different from ontological order. beings of second intention, logical order, exist only in our mind. What exists in the reality, being of the first intention. The real cat is here. John eats an apple. John is the real people. When I say John is the subject of the verb to eat, that is second intention, exists only in my mind. Okay? Proof. All knowledge in its dependence on reality is, of course, ultimately dependent on the first reality. Of course, we can, there is a part of truth. Not everything Father Gioberti or Descartes or Malebranche says is the truth. Of course, it is true that everything depends on God as first reality. So God is the ultimate source of all truth as our being, because what is being is the knowledge of truth. Therefore, truth is knowledge of being. Every being exists because of God. And because it exists, I can know it. So my mind knows the reality because first the reality exists. But why does the reality exist? Because God created the reality. So we can say with Gioberto that it's true that God is the source of all our knowledge as the creator of the object we know. Okay? But my knowledge is not given directly by God, totally. It is not because, for example, you see many desks in the class. Huh? Well, you can say, okay, I see the object, I see the desk, but seeing the desk, can you say exactly who did that? No. You say there must be a designer, an artisan, a craftsman, how do you say? I forget that.
Carpenter.
A carpenter. You know? So it is not because God is the creator of everything that knowing everything, I know God. Is it true? People see, okay, if I have faith, or I am an idealist, I would say, thing exists, and that is a direct proof of the existence of God. But when we study logic, remember we have to come to logic. Huh? If P, then Q. If we have in Q, what is Q? Q is the effect. Q is the creation. Cause is P. So can we start from creation directly to have in P? No. We have to study the many possibilities. And that is the denial of the teaching of Father Gioberti, because according to him, we should have both together. Well, if we have the effect, we don't have the cause. Imagine if it was true, it was very, very easy to be a detective. A detective arrives, he sees a dead man, he says, oh, Joe Blow did that. We know, it's clear. No, it's not clear at all. Sometimes that takes years and years and years, sometimes they never settle the problem. Okay? Yet, I continue. Our knowledge does not begin with knowledge of God. In fact, my knowledge did not begin my knowledge of God. My knowledge began with my knowledge of my mother, my grandmother, my father. I did not have a cat at Montreal at that time. You know, my brothers, after that my sisters. The knowledge comes from our experience. But rather with certain first principle. If it is the first principle, there is being. I will say the first principle of every knowledge is there is being. And if there is being, there must be some principle of being. And one of them is the principle of non-contradiction or contradiction, non-contradiction, principle of identity, the principle of causality, etc. All the first principles we study in logic and in metaphysics. So we use those principles to arrive to the existence of God. But we don't start from the existence of God to know that. Okay? Well, you can read by yourself what is in the rectangle. I continue just on there. But knowledge must evidently begin with the self-evident. That means of every knowledge we have start from intuition. That means from something self-evident. That means we don't reason on that. Every knowledge should start from that. Otherwise, it is a pure invention of your mind, of your reason. Okay? So our knowledge starts from a first experience. First experience of being, a being that exists in itself before I know it. Before you go to Australia, you see for the first time a kangaroo. The kangaroo existed before you know it. It is not because you have the idea of kangaroo that the kangaroo exists. The contrary. It is because the kangaroo exists that you have the idea of kangaroo. So our knowledge starts from self-evident and proceed through the demonstration of the self-evident. That means our knowledge comes from facts, from experience. Here I come back to logic. And remember in logic we start three propositions: major, minor, and conclusion. Okay? The conclusion is God exists. Okay? But what is first in my mind? What strikes my mind is not, they are not the first principle. What strikes my mind first are the facts, events, facts, events, etc. And those events, there must be explained. And to explain them, I use some principle. I use the principle of identity, I use the principle of contradiction, and I use most of the time the principle of causality. That is the general. You remember the major contains the general principle. You remember your mother cooks, prepare a pie, or prepare, I don't know what you like. So she has some general principle. First, if you are in the bush, you have to find wood to put fire, prepare the fire, okay? And to catch the, if you want to eat the chicken, you have to find the chicken. So you sit at the boy, hey, John, run and take me, It's funny, in the gospel we have that. No, when the prodigal son came back home, what the father said?
Come to me. I don't know. What do you say?
Go to kill the...
Go and find and catch the fat cow, the fat, you know. So that is a general in everything. You write, you apply the general principle. When I want to write, I must use a tool, a pencil or computer, you know. It is a common sense, a general principle. And general principle, we apply that to the fact, and finally we arrive to a conclusion. That is the general way we use when we reason. And to know God, we reason like that. What is the fact? The fact is the order in the world, the motion in the world, the contingency in the world, the necessity, the beauty, etc. All that are facts. And to explain those facts, I must go to a cause. That is the way we know the existence of God, using our reason. Okay? And St. Thomas confirmed Father Legault and Father McCormick. I don't pretend I confirm St. Thomas, because even if I come after St. Thomas, it is interesting what you write. I will read a bit. Man naturally knows God in the same way as he naturally desires Him. It's interesting. St. Thomas makes an analogy between to know and to love. Okay? Now man naturally desires Him, inasmuch as he naturally desires happiness. You remember that? Which is certain likeness of the divine goodness. So man is searching for a likeness. Happiness is a likeness of the divine goodness. So, likeness, don't forget likeness, comparison. So therefore it is not necessary that God Himself, considering Himself, should be naturally known to man, but only His likeness. And when I have an analogy, what is an analogy? It's a comparison, likeness, you know. And he behoves, that means it is proper to man, by means of the likeness of God found in the effect, to come to the knowledge of God by reasoning. So we start from the effect Q to go to the cause P, using the principle of causality. And that is the skeleton of all the fruit of the existence of God. The same skeleton that we see now. You know? He continues, God is indeed that in which all things are known, but not in such a way that other things are not known, unless when He is known. That means it's not necessary to know God first to know the rest of the creation. On the contrary, we know creation, the universe, and from that we go to God. Okay. Now the summary. Here is very, I think the rectangle is very good. By means of the likeness of God found in His effects, man can arrive to the knowledge of God through reasoning. Man has no direct and intuitive knowledge of God, but only an indirect, analogical knowledge of God, obtained a posteriori, after experiencing the effects and through logical demonstration. That is the synthesis of the chapter, that paragraph here. I go now to another current we call traditionalism. And in that we see two major tendencies. The first is Kant, Immanuel Kant, and the second it is the traditionalists themselves, but they don't mention anyone. I think one of them was Félicité of Lamennais. It's for the specialist. Okay, Kant. Bon. Kant wrote, we call the critic of pure reason. That means he tried to see if really the pure reason can attain being beyond experiment. He said the noumena, par opposition to phenomenon. Can attain to noumenon. That means what is under the appearance. We call that the substance for us in scholastic philosophy. Okay? So I read the text here. For Kant, the first modern experience is the experience of duty. Duty. I am obliged. He recognizes the extreme existence of God as a postulate of morality. So his proof is the moral proof, and that moral proof will be used also by St. Thomas. In fact, St. Thomas used it before Kant. Because I am obliged to live morally, God must exist. So the three postulates of practical reason are: man is free, the human soul is immortal, and God exists to be the judge. The moral obligation will not exist without those three postulates. If it is the moral proof of the existence of God, you by St. Thomas. Okay, I continue. His criticism of Kant is, insofar as it was successful, did compare dogmatic rationalism. In fact, he fought against dogmatic rationalism who pretended to explain everything. He said, no, we cannot explain everything. We can explain a part of thing, but a part we cannot. We can explain the phenomenon, we cannot explain the noumenon. Okay? That is the position of Kant. But when he does that, what he is doing is killing metaphysics. He's killing metaphysics. He's a murderer. Why? Because metaphysics is the study of the noumen, the substance. Here, a phenomenon, they are the accidents. The accident we can define on our senses, you know. But the noumen, the substance, so we know nothing. If we don't know the substance, we don't know the essence of things, we cannot know metaphysics. There is no possibility of metaphysics. And if there is no possibility of metaphysics, you cannot know God. Through your reason, through metaphysics. So how can you know God? Through ethics. Through ethics. So the way for Kant to arrive to God is the ethics, the way of ethics. Okay? is the reason why Kant is one of the most important philosophers in ethics today. Huh? He inspired the Declaration of the Human Rights, etc. Okay. But at the same time, it served religion. Kant was a Lutheran. No? He was educated in a very strict Lutheran. No? In the proof of that, all his philosophy is based on duty, no? Obligation, pure obligation, without any reason. That is the ideal. Huh? In fact, it is fideism. Fideism. Huh? That means I don't use my reason, I use only my mind, my faith. And that was the pure faith of Lutheranism, the extreme of Lutheranism, Catholic also, we have the same current. Huh? Pietism, only piety, the rest has no value. Huh? There is a dichotomy between my reason and my piety, my faith. My faith is blind, but my reason is good for material things. You know? But on Sunday, I am a good Catholic, a good Protestant. During the week, I am a good businessman without linking anything with my faith, you know, separation. Huh? Is the reason why Protestant can be easily theist and deist. It is easy for Protestant to be Illuminati, to be Freemason. You know why? It is easy because on Sunday they have pure faith, on Sunday, pure faith. And during the week, they say God don't bother us because He created the world. Now it is my responsibility to make money. Huh? No universal principle. It is my that explains many things. Huh? Okay, so if I cannot attain the lumen through my reason, I destroy metaphysics, and also I make religion only a question of blind faith. Like Agnosticim. Remember Agnostic last week? I say, you know, they don't attack religion directly, but in fact they destroy religion. When they say we cannot use our reason to believe. And Kant say almost the same thing. Okay? But he saves God. No, he doesn't save God. He saves our knowledge of God by another way, the way of morality, the way of ethics, duty. Another current is the traditionalism. It was popular at the end of the 19th century in Vatican, during the whole 19th century, and Vatican first will react against that. So with a similar, okay, traditionalism make an attack on the capacity of reason to attain the truth in a religious manner. The same thing as the Kant, as the agnostic. Huh? And ended into an unreasoning fideism. Because I cannot use my reason, I use only my faith. Accepting to, according to traditionalists, huh, the individual reason is incapable of attaining the truth with certainty. But we can attain the truth through social reason. In fact, the revelation was given to the society at the beginning of the world, and I can know the truth of God, about God, only through social path, not through my personal path. That's the tradition, you know, from generation to generation, from Adam and Eve to now. We call that traditionalism. Okay. For the beginning of knowledge is from divine revelation. So for them, God revealed Himself at the beginning. Or for Catholic, or for Protestant, for Jews, at creation of man, Adam and Eve. He revealed Himself. Okay? And this revelation is preserved in the tradition of the human race, of which tradition social reason is the bearer. So the tradition is not kept by individual. The tradition of believing in God, the proof of God, is in the society in general, not in the individual. So I cannot, through my individual reason, know the existence of God. I know because the society, in general, believes in God. In fact, when you study sociology, one of the pillars of any society is religion. Even when you study atheist society, you study religion, because it is a reality in every. So it is a reality according to them, and it is the society generation after generation that carries the idea of God and not the personal idea. Okay? Therefore, the origin of the idea of God could not be a result of any exercise of human reason, but a primitive revelation to Adam and Eve. Okay? For to know what this principle, primitive revelation contain, we must interrogate tradition. So to know what God said, we have to question tradition, and we shall find the genuine tradition in the collective testimony of the human race. In fact, here it is touching another proof of the existence of God, because the universal acceptance of God, the universal belief. In every culture, every culture, it is almost very rare, excessively rare, that they will discover a culture without God. They believe in gods, they believe in energy, they believe supreme, but there is something above man. Something above man. Because there is something above man, there is a religion. We saw that last week. Religion is a relation between man and the being above him. It can be the sun, it can be the moon, etc. Now, at the bottom, 3.6, criticism. Traditionalism reduces our religion knowledge to unreasoning faith. In fact, all that is unreasonable. Not unreasonable, unreasoning. We accept the tradition because it is the tradition. We accept the word of God through the tradition without reasoning. It is leading to fideism. Both are leading to fideism. That means faith is independent from reason. And you know, we understand now why John Paul II wrote a letter about that. Faith and reason. Because even positivism today, they say a scientist cannot believe in God as a scientist. But you can go to church on Sunday, that is faith. But when you work in your laboratory, it's not faith, that is science. You know? So faith and reason are separated. There is a dichotomy, a division. In fact, that leads us to a kind of schizophrenia. We are spiritual schizophrenia. We have a religion on Sunday, and we have other value during the week. You know? So the sole criterion of truth is the authority of God, as testified by human tradition. So we cannot use our reason. We believe in God because our ancestors did that because the society, you know, Muslims are not far from there. Huh? The Muslim faith is a social faith. I read recently that now they speak about atheist Muslim. Atheist Muslim. It's contradictory to say that. Huh? That means they continue to practice their religion because they have no choice. On Friday they go to the mosque, but they don't believe. You know, that either it is against that the imam now they react against that, because for them they have destroyed Islam. Huh? Okay, next page 30. Traditionalism undermines all the rational foundation of religious being. Because how could we know that God had made a revelation unless first we know that God exists? And when we say God exists, what is that? God exists. It is a judgment. And what is a judgment? It's an act of my reason. And we saw in logic that every judgment is preceded by a reasoning, okay? Or by an experience. Secondly, how could we accept an alleged revelation as coming from God unless we know that God has made it? You know, if my ancestor gave me the affirmation of the existence of God, why? Because I must affirm through my reason, I must affirm that God exists. That means we cannot escape the usage of our reason. Pure fideism is a nonsense. We cannot have pure fideism. It's impossible. And if you want to do that, you become fanatist, fanatic out there. Okay? A conclusion. So the first inclination of this fact cannot have come to man originally from revelation, but must be independent of revelation prior to us. That means we have to accept that we know God through our reason. Don't forget, I am not in theology, I am in philosophy. Even in theology, I must use my reason. There's a reason why the Catholic Church insists that if you have 4 years of theology or 3 years of theology, you must have at least 2 years of philosophy. Because she is very aware, our Catholic Church, that we must use our reason when we study theology. Otherwise, we fall into fideism. Fideism is very dangerous. Because either you become a fanatic, or a day you realize that you do something without using your reason and you abandon everything. It is almost what happened in my country. People believe without, suddenly they realize that there was no foundation, and they say, oh, that is garbage. We don't take care of that. You know, a reason is important even in theology. We cannot pray to God without using our reason. Every act we do of piety must be reasonable. A remark about the Vatican I, I spoke about that. Now the origin of God, now St. Thomas. I have 5-6 minutes for that, just a paragraph. Man can attain the idea of God by his reason, the power of reason. By natural tendency to employ that power is inquiring into nature and cause of things. That means by nature I am curious to know things, and by nature think because, we saw that, because things are true, but they can be known. They can be known. The object is possess a form that I can know. I can assimilate things. And I have the power to abstract the idea from the thing, my reason. And that is through my experience, using the self-evident principle that everything must be traced back to a cause. In fact, underlying that is the principle of causality. And what is the summit of the principle of causality? It is what we call principle of sufficient reason. Can I speak about the principle of causality in God, about God? Was God cause? Can God cause himself? No. But I can say, if God exists, he has a sufficient reason. It is himself, you know. And that means every being existing requires a sufficient reason. And it is so true that, you know, what is the question of kids? What is that and why? They must have a reason. In fact, the children are opening their mind because they are searching for a sufficient reason for everything. When the mother says, go to bed, why, mother? Because it's this late and tomorrow we have class. The children must. Why? They are intelligent. We are intelligent. We are searching for a cause, a reason. Next page, page 14. So men arrive to the knowledge of God as maker of the universe, and some knowledge of the nature of God. Well, it is exactly the content of all the semester. First, we arrive to the notion of God as the maker, the creator, existing. And secondly, who is God? The attribute of God. Through our reason. So, in fact, not every finite perfection reveals totally God. That is true. It's not because I see a beautiful flower that is God is. No, God is beautiful because He makes a beautiful flower, but He is infinitely beautiful. So we start from the perfection of a thing, a perfection of a thing, to the finite, a perfection of a finite, to the perfection of the infinite being. So that is the way we process. And all the time we work on that. We know God only from His effects, from the perfection. How we can say God is intelligent? Because we are intelligent as effect. because there is an intelligent way of organizing the nature. From that we can affirm God is infinitely intelligent. But we cannot theoretically affirm from the finite to the infinite. We have to reason, of course. Huh? Don't forget, all the time we reason. Philosophy of God is essentially a syllogism. Huh? Continually we are making reasoning, continually. Because we cannot have a direct knowledge of God. Huh? So the idea of God is indirect, huh? Mediate. Rather, and finally, we have a very important paragraph, is 3.7.3. I will read that, huh? Very, very important. It's the synthesis. Huh? Therefore, man is capable of originating an idea of God, producing an idea of God. In this process of originating an idea of God, there is no step beyond the capacity of natural reason. That means he can do that using only his natural reason. That is the dogma affirmed by Vatican I. Huh? Okay? Man can observe the visible universe around him. That is the fact. That is the minor. You remember? Major and minor. Huh? That is the fact. Minor. Okay? Man can recognize the self-evidence of the principle of causality. That is major. The principle of causality, the fact. And finally, following that, man will come to the correct conclusion. The correct conclusion with regard of the existence of God, and after that, of the nature of God, attributes of God. But there is possibility of error. Why? Because it is a reasoning. It is a human act. When we reason about God, we are not in the domain of faith, a domain of revelation. We are in the domain of reason. And because we are in the domain of reason, we can make mistakes. No? Is that the reason why someone arrived to the conclusion God does not exist, or God is the moon, God is the sun, you know? But in fact, they start from the same fact, they use the same principle, but they don't arrive to the same conclusion. Remember when you study mathematics, huh? You have the same fact, the teacher gives you the same data, you use the same principle, sometimes you don't arrive at the same conclusion. Huh? Of course, you are always good in mathematics. And in fact, of course, we arrive, number one, we say, make for himself God fashioned to his own image, anthropomorphism. Huh? In fact, polytheism is based on anthropomorphism. God make divinities with the attributes of God. He made, in fact, the many divinities are corresponding to the attributes of God. Huh? And also uses mythology, huh? Legends. Huh? Some legends start from reality. And the last page, now, is it useful and necessary to have revelation? So divine revelation helps man. Huh? And St. Thomas said that the truth with regard of God, to God, which human reason can discover, will be known only after a considerable time and with admixture of many errors. Since revelation was needed that men might know this truth readily, with firm certitude and without error. That is the precondition for virtue. Huh? So man was able to attain God, but many times he made a lot of mistakes. For example, you remember the idea of creation was unknown by the Greeks. You know? So the idea of creation was, in fact, enter our mind through revelation. But when we know through revelation, we use our reason, we continue to use our reason. When I believe that God is the creator, and not only an act of faith, it is also an act of reason. But I know that because revelation gives that to man. Because for the Greek, the word was eternal. Huh? Matter was eternal. Okay, so those who will go to Washington, I wish you. We have a class on Wednesday, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, no. On Wednesday. So we go to the next chapter. Huh? Next chapter. The demonstrability of the existence of God.